In the quiet town of Neni in Anambra State, where the red soil clung to the soles of your feet and the breeze carried the scent of roasted corn and harmattan dust, lived a man named Ebuka. At 45, he was known by all as a man of vigor, tall, broad-chested, with dark skin like polished mahogany, and a voice that could command silence even in a crowded village square. He owned a thriving block molding business at the edge of town, and on most days, his laughter echoed through the air as he gave commands to his workers. To the outside world, Ebuka was a man who had conquered his circumstances, a rural boy who built a future with nothing but his two hands and relentless ambition. But beneath the surface, hidden in whispers and side glances, was a truth darker than the shadowed corners of his compound at night. For all his hard work, Ebuka was plagued by one vice: women. Not just admiration or flirtation, but obsession, indulgence. He courted beauty recklessly, like a hunter addicted not to meat but the thrill of the kill. He would vanish for nights, returning with lipstick marks on his shirt and foreign perfumes clinging to his neck like ghosts. Yet, his wife, Adora, said nothing. She smiled at neighbors, fetched water, cooked his meals, and raised their 3 children in silence. Her grief, bottled like palm wine left too long in the sun, slowly fermenting into something volatile. Adora was just 16 when she married Ebuka, a wide-eyed, intelligent girl with dreams of becoming a school teacher. But dreams in their part of Anambra often wilted in the face of tradition. She was given to Ebuka like a harvest offering, the elders nodding in approval as her mother wept behind the curtain. At first, she believed in love, in a new beginning. Ebuka was kind, charming even. He would buy her suya on the way home and call her my Ada, the sugar in my tea. But as the years wore on and the children came, a boy, then another, then a girl, Adora found herself drowning in routines. She cooked, cleaned, nursed fevers, and plastered on smiles for visitors. And through it all, she endured the slow realization that her husband was not hers. He was the community's man. Every woman seemed to know the taste of him. Each time he returned with tired excuses or late-night laughter reeking of cheap alcohol and perfume, Adora's silence thickened like congealed blood. Her friends urged her to leave, but she stayed, perhaps out of fear or duty, or a hope that someday he'd remember her sacrifices. But sacrifices made without acknowledgement rot, and Adora's silence was no longer patience. It was a pressure cooker, sealed too tight, whispering its first hiss. It was during the rainy season that things began to change, the type of season where the clouds hung low over the trees, heavy and ominous, and the rain came not in droplets but in slaps, pounding rooftops like angry fists. On such a day, Adora stood by the window, watching the palm trees sway as thunder rolled across the sky. That morning, she had overheard something while buying ogbono at the market. 2 women whispering behind a stall said Ebuka was planning to marry a second wife, a girl not older than 19 from a nearby village. They spoke with the glee of those who relish tragedy, relaying details. The girl was pregnant, the family had already accepted the bride price, and the wedding was set for a month's end. Adora felt something shift in her chest that day. Not rage, but clarity, the kind that came with betrayal too deep to explain. She returned home, made ofe onugbu for her children, and that night, as Ebuka slept, she stared at his back for hours, fingers clenched around the kitchen knife she'd used to slice yam earlier. The rain outside seemed to laugh, a slow cackle that tapped against the windows like fingernails. The children were fast asleep. Ebuka snored, unaware of the storm building, not just outside, but inside the woman he had taken for granted for 12 years. The house that Ebuka built sat on a plot of land that once belonged to his late father, a proud hunter who died from a snake bite deep in the thickets of Umunze forest. The villagers said the land was strong, blessed by ancestral blood and the sacrifices of those who tilled it before the first white man stepped foot on their soil. Ebuka didn't care for such superstitions. He built his 3-bedroom bungalow with the profits of concrete and sweat, not spirits. But Adira believed. She believed the walls of the house carried memories and secrets. Every night, as she lay beside her husband, pretending to sleep, she would stare at the rough lines of the ceiling and wonder if the cement remembered. Did it remember the promises Ebuka made on their wedding night, the whispers of love under mosquito nets, the first cries of their children? Or did it also remember the lies, the scent of strange women, the muffled giggles outside their gate, the name Ngozi moaned in drunken dreams? Adora had stopped speaking her pain out loud. There was no point. But when the generator died and the nights became quiet again, she began to feel the house listening. The walls held everything: the betrayal, the exhaustion, the rage. Sometimes, when Ebuka snored too loudly and the wind rattled the zinc roof, Adora would press her palm to the wall and whisper to it, just to feel like someone or something was listening. And when she finally heard a whisper back, soft, breathless, and unmistakably female, she told herself it was the wind. Until it said her name. It started with the mirror in the corridor, a long, dusty thing framed in old mahogany that Ebuka insisted on keeping, though Adora always said it felt wrong. She hated the way it reflected not just her image, but her exhaustion. Her eyes were always ringed with shadows now, her once round cheeks gone from stress, her skin dulled by years of carrying the weight of motherhood and emotional abandonment. One Tuesday morning, as she was sweeping the corridor, the mirror flickered, just for a moment, like the reflection had blinked. Adora froze, broom in hand. She leaned closer, squinting. Her reflection stared back, lips closed. But something was off. Her eyes, in the mirror, her eyes were smiling, but she wasn't. Her real mouth was flat, her stomach twisted. She turned away, telling herself she was imagining things. But it happened again 2 nights later. This time the mirror reflection smiled, wide, unblinking, and whispered, "He's leaving you." Adora dropped the tray of eba she was carrying, the sound of shattering ceramic waking her children. She ran to them, scooped up her daughter, and held her tight. When Ebuka returned that night, drunk as usual, and laughed at the mess, she didn't respond. But she passed the corridor again and saw the mirror still smiling. She covered it with an old wrapper the next day, but the laughter, low, mocking, distinctly female, started echoing faintly from behind the cloth at night. Adera stopped sleeping. In Igbo land, the elders say the air changes before evil visits a home. Birds stop chirping. Dogs refuse to bark. The trees sway without wind. Adora began to notice these signs, subtle at first. The family's old goat, blind in one eye, started bleating madly every night between the hours of 2 and 3. The children would toss and turn in their sleep, sometimes waking with scratches they couldn't explain. And then came the shadows. Not the kind made by moonlight or lanterns, but darker, thicker, like someone standing just out of view. Adora saw one in the kitchen, then again outside the children's room. It didn't move like a person, it pulsed like it was breathing. She told Ebuka once. He laughed, called it women's wahala, and told her to stop watching all those African magic midnight movies. But the laughter in the mirror grew louder. The walls whispered more often. The dreams became darker. She saw herself holding a knife, not cooking, not defending, just stabbing again and again, until her hands were red and something inside her felt clean for the first time in years. She began to forget her children's voices during the day, but at night, they were the only thing tethering her to reality. Little hands clutching her wrapper, sleepy voices calling mommy. But even then, she could feel something else moving closer, something that wasn't quite human, and it smelled like blood. It was a Wednesday evening when the pot in Adora's kitchen whispered. The sky had just darkened, the clouds low and swollen, grumbling with a promise of storm. She had finished bathing the children, rubbed their small legs with shea butter, and fed them roasted plantain and beans. Ebuka hadn't returned yet, which was a small blessing. She could feel the tension in her neck loosen when he wasn't around, as if the house itself relaxed without him. She moved to the kitchen to clean, humming quietly under her breath when she heard it. A faint voice, small, feminine. It came from inside the old clay pot her mother gave her on her wedding day, the one she used for special soups and had refused to throw away, even when Ebuka insisted on using new stainless ones. At first she thought it was the wind, but the whisper was clearer than wind. "Adora," it breathed, like smoke curling from dying embers. "He is preparing her bed." Adora froze. Her spine tingled. She stepped closer, and again the voice echoed slightly louder. "He is buying her wrapper, gold, lace, gel." Her chest constricted, a rising panic making her breath quicken. She picked up the pot and dumped it outside, where it shattered against the compound ground. That night, as the rain fell like war drums, Ebuka returned with a new shirt and matching gold wristwatch. "How do I look?" he asked, spinning playfully. "There's a wedding coming soon. Not mine, but I must look sharp." Adora said nothing, but when she looked down at his wrist, she could see the exact fabric the pot had described, wrapped in tiny threads of shimmering lace. That night, she heard the broken pieces of the pot outside singing. She cried into her pillow, the thunder outside failing to drown out the voices in her head. The next day, Adora stood by the window again, watching the rain as it softened the red soil outside into mud. The compound gate creaked gently in the breeze, and the plantain trees swayed with a rhythm that felt unnatural, like a silent warning. She was still wrapped in her faded blue wrapper, her headscarf loose, when she saw the girl. She appeared near the well, standing barefoot in the rain, her yellow dress soaked and clinging to her small frame. Her hair was long, black, and braided in the traditional style of maidens during Iriji festivals. At first, Adora thought she might be one of the neighbor's children. But then the girl looked up and smiled. Not a child's smile, not innocent. Her teeth were too white, too perfect. Her eyes were too black, too still. Adora blinked and the girl vanished. Just like that. No splash, no movement. Only the wet footprints she left behind, leading toward the back of the house. Adora stepped outside despite the rain. Her feet sank into the mud as she followed the footprints, one after the other, until they stopped at the window of the children's bedroom. The glass had fogged from the inside. She wiped it gently with her fingers. Her 3 children lay sleeping peacefully on their mattress, cuddled together under a single faded blanket. But at the edge of the room, crouched low near the cupboard, was the girl, the same one, smiling, watching them. Adora screamed. She burst through the front door, ran to the children's room, flung the door open, only to find no one but her babies. No girl, no strange presence. But the floor was wet, and a single muddy footprint led from the cupboard to the foot of her daughter's bed. Adora shut the door, locked it 3 times, and didn't sleep at all. When Ebuka asked what was wrong, she simply said, "Your sins are no longer hiding." That same night, while the house creaked in silence and the children dozed in their room, Adora sat awake in the parlor, clutching a Bible with shaking hands. She had never been deeply religious, but desperation often leads one to find God in the darkest corners. Her thoughts swirled like storm clouds. Every noise made her flinch. The ticking clock on the wall, the branches scratching the window, the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. But what made her blood freeze wasn't a sound. It was a smell. Something thick, metallic, familiar. She sniffed the air, nose twitching. Blood. She rose slowly, clutching the Bible tighter, and tiptoed toward the kitchen. The light flickered when she entered, and there, on the counter, was a bowl of ogbono soup. Fresh, hot, steam rising. But she hadn't cooked that. She hadn't even entered the kitchen since morning. She backed away slowly, then froze. Someone was sitting at the dining table. Her heart stopped. Slowly, mechanically, her head turned. It was a woman, back-facing Adora. Braids long and wet. Yellow dress glowing faintly. The girl, the one from the rain. She was eating, slurping loudly, like someone who hadn't eaten in years. The sound was nauseating, wet, obscene. Then the girl spoke without turning. "He said he would leave you. He said you are old." Adora dropped the Bible. The girl turned, blood dripping from her mouth. Not soup, blood. Her eyes were now hollow holes of darkness, and her voice echoed like a chorus of 1,000 betrayed women. Kill him, before he brings me in. Then the lights went out. The lights did not return that night. Even the generator, which Ebuka often kept fueled and maintained meticulously, sputtered once and died. Adora scrambled for the small oil lamp they kept in the corridor, a relic from older days when NEPA failures were more frequent. She lit it with trembling fingers, the flickering flame casting wild shadows across the walls. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for the girl in the yellow dress, but she was gone. The soup had vanished too. No bowl, no spoon, not even a trace of blood, just the lingering coppery scent that still clung to the air, heavy and nauseating. Adora placed the lamp on the floor, sat beside it, and wrapped her arms around her knees. She didn't cry. Her tears had long dried up. Instead, she rocked gently, humming an old lullaby her mother once sang. It was the only thing that kept her grounded. The flame danced, the shadows swirled, and then from the wall behind her, a voice whispered, low, sultry, familiar. Adora, you were his first wife, but not the only one. Her blood turned to ice. She turned slowly, the lamp shaking in her hand. The wall, smooth concrete minutes ago, was now pulsating, like breathing flesh. A silhouette emerged, a woman's face pressed against the cement from the other side, as if the wall had become a thin membrane. He made promises to many, it hissed. You are just the one that stayed. Adora's scream stuck in her throat. She ran to the children's room, locked the door again, and held all three of them tightly in her arms. Their little bodies were warm, alive, innocent. But in the flickering lamplight, she thought she saw something on her daughter's leg, 3 small scratches, fresh, shaped like fingernails. As the wind howled and thunder cracked, Adora finally allowed one tear to escape, but even it felt too late. The next morning, the air was heavy, damp with the scent of wet soil and something sour like fermented fear. Ebuka left early, whistling a careless tune and dressing in the shirt Adora had ironed 2 days ago. She watched him from the window, lips pressed tight. She wanted to scream, to tell him everything. The girl, the voices, the mirror, the wall. But she didn't. Something held her back, a whisper in her mind saying, he won't believe you. He never has. So she let him go, wondering if it would be the last time she saw him alive. By mid-afternoon, the sky was pale and grey, with clouds that threatened but never delivered. That was when the first knock came, sharp, deliberate, 3 times. Adora stood still, a knife in one hand and a half-sliced yam in the other. The knock came again. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the curtain. No one. She stepped outside slowly, heart pounding. The compound was empty. No visitors, no children playing. Even the neighborhood chickens seemed to have vanished. But then she noticed the front gate. It had been unlatched. She was certain she'd locked it earlier. A chill crept down her spine. That evening, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This time from the back door. She didn't go to check. She just clutched her daughter tightly and whispered prayers she barely remembered. But after midnight, as the moonlight bathed the compound in ghostly silver, she heard it a 3rd time. 3 knocks, then silence. Then a voice, you were not his first, you won't be his last unless you stop him. Adora curled up in the corner of the room and began to rock again. The knocks didn't come again that night. But in the morning, muddy footprints led from the front gate to the children's room window and stopped there. With her sanity unraveling and fear curling around her like smoke, Adora made a decision the next day. She would visit Mama Ngozi, the oldest woman in the village, said to know things no one else dared speak of. Some called her a prophetess, others whispered that she was a witch. Adora didn't care. She needed answers, needed to know if she was losing her mind or if the dead had truly begun whispering through her walls. Leaving the children with her teenage cousin who had come for the weekend, she wrapped herself in a dark brown wrapper and set off toward the thick forest trail that led to the older part of the village. The path was narrow, roots curling up like grasping fingers, and the sun barely penetrated the thick canopy. Birds fell silent as she walked. Even the wind refused to blow. When she reached the clearing, Mama Ngozi was already waiting, seated on a low stool outside her mud house, wearing a red scarf and beads that clinked when she moved. Her eyes were white, clouded with age or something far older. "You've seen her," the old woman said before Adora spoke. "The girl, the bride of the blood tree?" Adora's legs nearly gave out. She fell to her knees. "What is happening to me?" she cried. "To my house?" Mama Ngozi beckoned her close, placing a wrinkled hand on her head. "Your husband disturbed something, Adora. This land, this very soil, was not meant for betrayal. It remembers, and it punishes." She reached for a small calabash beside her and opened it. Inside was dark, sticky liquid, and a single yellow braid. "She was the first," Mama Ngozi whispered. "The first he promised marriage to, and abandoned. She hung herself on the palm tree beside your compound, the day your bride price was paid." Adora gasped. She had always wondered why the palm tree behind the house never bore fruit. "Now she waits," the old woman said. "And she has tasted your blood," Adora screamed. But the forest swallowed the sound whole. After the visit to Mama Ngozi, Adora's nights became restless beyond anything she had ever known. The old woman's words echoed ceaselessly in her mind, each syllable like a drumbeat of doom pounding in her chest. She found herself drawn to the palm tree behind their compound, the one that had never borne fruit, its trunk scarred by deep grooves and strange markings no villager dared explain. She stood beneath it one evening, the fading sun casting long shadows through the fronds, and traced the marks with trembling fingers. They were fresh as the scratches on her daughter's leg. She whispered a prayer, but the wind carried her words away, twisted them into something sinister. As twilight deepened, she felt a presence behind her. A chill ran down her spine as the ghostly figure of the girl in the yellow dress emerged silently from the shadows, her eyes empty, lips parted in a cold smile. "She is hungry," the girl whispered. "Hungry for blood, for justice, for you." Adora staggered back, falling against the tree. Her heart thundered in her ears. The palms rustled, but there was no breeze. The whispers in the wind grew louder, chants, voices calling names, crying out for retribution. That night, as the children slept and Ebuka returned late and drunk, Adora didn't greet him. She only stared at the palm tree from the window, the spectral image of the girl etched in her mind, and wondered if her husband would live to see the dawn. Ebuka came home staggering, smelling of palm wine and cheap perfume. His shirt was crumpled, the new gold wristwatch glinting coldly in the lamplight. Adora stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, the house heavy with unspoken threats. "You're late," she said, voice flat. He laughed, a sound that once charmed but now grated like nails on wood. "Business kept me. You worry too much, Mahada." But Adora's eyes held a fire. "I know about the wedding," she said softly. The words fell between them like poison. Ebuka froze, face hardening. "What wedding?" he spat. "Don't lie to me." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You think I'm blind? You think I'm stupid? After all these years, I deserve the truth." Ebuka's laugh died. He looked away. "It's not what you think. Then what is it?" Adora pressed, stepping into the dim light. "Tell me who she is. Tell me why you bring her here in your mind when you sleep." Ebuka's hand shook as he reached for the liquor bottle. "Enough," he snapped. "You'll ruin everything." Adora's breath hitched, but she stood her ground. "I'm done with silence." And with that, the ghostly chill that had haunted the house all week seemed to coalesce behind her. Like a living thing, Ebuka turned abruptly, retreating into the shadows, and Adora whispered, "The past never stays buried." Outside, the wind howled again, carrying a voice that sounded suspiciously like the girl in the yellow dress. The children had begun to change. The oldest son, 10-year-old Chima, once loud and playful, became withdrawn. His eyes darted nervously to corners of rooms where no one stood. The 8-year-old Obina cried out at night, clutching his blankets as if it could protect him from unseen terrors. And little Neka, just 5, refused to sleep alone, crawling into Adora's arms with wide, terrified eyes. "Mommy," Neka whispered one night, "the lady in yellow wants to play." Adora's heart shattered. She had tried to shield them, to keep the darkness at bay, but the shadow followed them like a stain. One afternoon, while the children played near the palm tree, Chima screamed suddenly and ran inside. "The lady, she's here. She wants me." Adora rushed outside to find the tree's bark bleeding a dark, sticky sap that smelled like iron. The children's innocence was crumbling under the weight of a curse they could not understand. Adora knew the evil would not stop until it had claimed something, perhaps all of them. Her mind spun with fear, anger, and a cold, growing resolve. She would fight whatever this was, even if it meant becoming the monster she feared. The morning after the children's terrifying encounter by the palm tree, the village seemed to hold its breath. A thick fog rolled low over the red soil, muting colors and dulling sounds, as if the earth itself mourned or warned. Adora woke before dawn, her heart pounding with a premonition she couldn't shake. The weight of what Mama Ngozi had said pressed down on her chest like a stone. Her husband's betrayal was not just a personal wound, it was a wound upon the land, upon the spirits that guarded it, and those spirits were restless. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake her children, and stepped outside. The palm tree stood like a sentinel, its leaves dripping with rain and something darker, something that gleamed faintly in the pre-dawn light. Her eyes caught the fresh scratches again, deeper than before, carved into the bark like cruel fingers. Adora knew that what had begun as whispers and shadows was now a reckoning. She had no choice but to face the truth. The girl in the yellow dress was not merely a ghost or a curse. She was a herald of death, a bride waiting to claim her due. Adora's fists clenched. If Ebuka's heart was to be broken, if her family was to be shattered, she would be the one to control the fracture, not the vengeful spirit, not the darkness closing in. That day, Adora searched the house with a fevered desperation, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain Ebuka's betrayal beyond whispered rumors and spectral warnings. In the dim light of the parlor, her fingers sifted through papers and faded photographs tucked in an old wooden chest. There, buried beneath invoices and birth certificates, she found a bundle of letters tied with a cracked red ribbon. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar, soft loops that contrasted with Ebuka's harsh scrawl. The letters were from Ngozi, not just any woman, but the one Mama Ngozi had warned her about, the first bride who had vanished in shame and sorrow. Adora read with growing horror. Ngozi's words told of promises made and broken, of dreams crushed beneath the weight of Ebuka's ambition and lust. She spoke of secret meetings in the forest, whispered plans of elopement, and a desperate plea for mercy that went unanswered. The last letter was a deathbed confession. Ngozi could no longer live with the betrayal and had taken her own life beneath the very palm tree that now haunted Adora's family. Tears burned Adora's eyes, but beneath her grief simmered something darker, rage. How could Ebuka live with such a secret? How could he bring that pain into their home, poisoning everything they had built? The house felt colder, the shadows deeper, as if Ngozi's spirit now seeped through the cracks and corners, eager for justice. That night, Adora lay awake, clutching the letters close to her chest, the whispered curses of the past swirling like smoke in the room. The children were asleep, but the house was restless. At the stroke of midnight, a cold breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying with it a faint melody. An old lullaby Adora remembered from her childhood, but twisted, dissonant, like a mournful dirge. She sat up suddenly, eyes wide in the darkness. From the shadows emerged the girl in the yellow dress, her form shimmering like mist. Her eyes glowed with a terrible sorrow, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "You have her letters," she said, voice both accusatory and pleading. Adora nodded, unable to speak. "Then you know the truth," the ghost whispered. "He promised me forever, but broke his vow." The specter drifted closer, reaching out with pale hands. Adora felt a chill pass through her as the ghost's touch was cold as the grave. "You must choose," the spirit said. Save your family or save your soul, but only one will live. Adora's heart shattered, the weight of her choice crushing her. As the spectre faded into the shadows, Adora realized that the war between the living and the dead had begun, and she was the battlefield. The dawn brought no relief. Instead, it pressed down on Adora's shoulders like a stone slab, heavy and suffocating. She sat by the window, clutching Ngozi's letters to her chest, the paper crinkling beneath trembling fingers. The sun's rays filtered weakly through the mist, casting a pale light on the house that had become a tomb for her family's secrets. The children stirred in the next room, their innocent faces a stark contrast to the growing darkness inside her. Adora's mind raced with the impossible choice the ghost had laid before her. To save her family meant a sacrifice she was not yet willing to understand. To save herself meant abandoning the children who depended on her, or worse, letting Ebuka live unpunished for the betrayals he had woven into their lives. The memories of Ebuka's smiles, his laughter, the soft words he once whispered under the moonlight, now twisted into cold reminders of lies and broken promises. The walls whispered again, voices overlapping, some pleading, some accusing. Adora closed her eyes and felt tears slip down her cheeks. She was trapped between two worlds, one where the living could still fight, and one where the dead claimed their due. She wondered if the spirits would be merciful, or if her own heart was already too broken to survive the reckoning. Later that day, Ebuka returned home early. His steps were heavy, his face shadowed by guilt or perhaps fear, Adora could not tell which. He found her sitting silently on the porch, the letter spread out like a battlefield between them. For the first time in years, his eyes met hers without defiance. "You've seen them," he said quietly. Adora nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you keep her from me?" Ebuka sank onto the chair beside her, rubbing his face. "I thought I could protect you from the past," he confessed. "I thought if you never knew, the ghost wouldn't come for us." His hands trembled. "But the past doesn't stay buried, Adora. It follows. It haunts. Ngozi was my first mistake, but not my last." The words cut deep, sharper than any knife. Adora's breath hitched. "What have you done?" she asked, voice breaking. Ebuka hesitated, then lowered his gaze. "I planned to marry the girl from the village, the one Mama Ngozi warned about. I thought it would end the curse. But I was wrong." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a distant, chilling laugh that neither dared acknowledge. The house seemed to pulse with anger, as if the walls themselves demanded justice. That night, Adora lay awake, listening to the soft sobs coming from the children's room. The house was still, save for the faint rustling of the palm fronds outside, whispering secrets in the wind. She rose quietly and crept to their door, where Chima, Obina, and little Nika huddled together, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy," Chima whispered, voice trembling. "The lady in yellow came again." Adora's heart clenched. "What did she say?" she asked softly, brushing his damp hair away from his forehead. "She said she's hungry, that she wants to play forever," Neka whimpered, clutching Adora's wrapper tightly. "She has sharp teeth," Obina added, voice small. Adora swallowed her fear, forcing a calm smile. "It's just a dream, my darlings. Nothing can hurt you while I'm here." But as she watched their frightened faces, she knew the nightmare was far from over. The ghost in the yellow dress was no longer a visitor. She was becoming a part of their lives, an ever-present shadow looming over their fragile happiness. Adora whispered a prayer and promised herself she would fight for her family, even if it meant facing the darkest depths of hell. As the first light of dawn bled through the cracked windows, Adora stood alone in the center of the compound, the early morning mist wrapping around her like a shroud. Her eyes, once bright with hope, were now hollowed by sleepless nights and unshed tears. The palm tree loomed behind her, its twisted trunk etched with blood-red scratches that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly life. The air around her vibrated with a tension so thick it pressed against her skin, making every breath a labor. The ghostly whispers had grown into a deafening chorus. Voices of betrayed women, of broken promises, of lives shattered by the man she once loved. Adeora clenched her fist around the knife she had hidden beneath her wrapper. The same knife she had once used to slice yams, now transformed into an instrument of reckoning. Tonight, the line between the living and the dead would be crossed. Tonight, she would decide if her family would be consumed by darkness or if she could sever the ties that bound them to this curse. Ebuka's footsteps echoed behind her, heavy and uncertain. He stopped, eyes wide with fear and something like remorse. "Adora, please," he pleaded, voice trembling. She turned slowly, a cold fire blazing in her gaze. "You made your choice a long time ago," she whispered, voice low and fierce. "Now I make mine." The wind howled. The palm fronds lashed like spectral arms reaching for her soul, and the girl in the yellow dress appeared, more solid, more terrifying than ever. Her hollow eyes locked onto Adora's with a promise. This night would be the reckoning, the beginning or the end. As darkness swallowed the village of Neni, Adora took a breath and stepped forward into the abyss.